The Nottingham Tennis Open has become one of the main pre-Wimbledon warm-up tournaments for many of the world's top players. The competition, the week before Wimbledon, is the final chance for last-minute preparations before the season's premier Grand Slam event. With the game of tennis faster and more powerful than it's ever been, and with the season lasting 49 weeks of the year, the dietary requirements of players has never been more important. Well, I'm off to meet Jeremy Bates now. You never know, he may need a bit of practice. Jeremy, how have the dietary requirements of players changed since your playing days?
I think as knowledge has got better, obviously diet is such an important part of any professional sportsman's life that if someone can get an edge, they'll do anything they can do to get that edge. So I think diets become more complex. Players will they'll look very seriously at what they're eating, break down all the meals into the best components they can possibly have in preparation for the professional sport.
Quite noisy around us at the moment because of course you're getting ready for the Open. How big a week is this for you?
It's very busy. It's a very exciting time of year. Obviously, the whole country is into the tennis and motivated by the tennis. They want the players to do well. There's a lot of British players playing here this week, and obviously at Wimbledon next week it is the focal point.
Going back to diet, what would a typical diet be these days for players?
Well, if there is such a thing, I think that they would start off in the mornings and with a good breakfast, definitely a good breakfast. You can't go out and start any sport unless you've got energy to begin with. Breakfast, a lot of bread, a lot of cereal, juice, things like that for breakfast. And as the day progresses, I think carbohydrates in general, pastas, vegetables, and certainly lots of fruit. They're all components of whatever quantity or however often you eat them. Those are the things that those players will be looking to use.
It depends on what time you're playing during the day. Normally, if you play in the afternoon, you have a reasonably breakfast, and then normally you eat pasta, carbohydrates, and then you're ready for the match.
I know marathon runners swear by pasta. Is that good for tennis players too?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it really is, a very sort of important part of all the players' diets, and unfortunately, it's sort of worldwide these days. You can always find, Italian restaurants, and the hotels are always serving that type of food, and there's so many varieties of it, so it never gets that monotonous. But there's always still a time for some meat and chicken and fish and all the rest of it. I mean, it's common sense, really, a lot of it, I think.
Well, one of the things you have to do is prepare yourself well before your matches. I think you should eat a lot of carbohydrates about 2.5, 3 hours before your matches, and a lot of carbohydrates like pasta, rice, and chicken is good to eat before your matches.
Any do's and don'ts? Saw you swigging a fizzy drink earlier on. Anything you should avoid?
I don't think you should avoid things necessarily. I mean, the fattier sort of foods and cakes and chocolate and all the rest of it, it's okay if you have it just occasionally in small quantities. And there's plenty of people who are out there watching their diet, but you'll catch them occasionally, having a Coke or having a bar of chocolate or something like that. It happens, but and it doesn't hurt you in small quantities.
A little bit of what you fancy does you good.
Exactly.
I've always been a person who eats whatever they want. I don't think it's necessarily good if you're going to be a professional athlete to be a vegetarian, because I think the body needs meat. But I've always eaten whatever I want in moderation. Now, I'm not going to have desserts every night, but if I want a dessert, I'll have a dessert here and there.
You, Mark Cox, are working with Britain's youngsters these days. Tell us about the training schedules.
Well, Mark heads up the Rover program that we have in the UK, and basically the players come onto the program age 12. They're identified at talent ID days throughout the country, and they come onto the Rover program up to 16, so they're obviously still in education. And it's a question of trying to combine as much tennis, as much tuition, and all the other components that we can get into them in combining it with the education up to the age of 16 until they make a decision after GCSEs to leave school. They want to pursue their career, at which time they come under the program that I'm involved in national training. And that is a full-time professional commitment to the sport.
How important is it to instill into youngsters the benefits of a good diet from an early age?
the diet can make such a difference to the levels of performance. You know, to they're growing rapidly, often at that sort of age. They're putting fresh demands on their body, which they wouldn't have done, you know, in terms of the number of hours on court, in terms of the hours that they're training, and you know, unless the food is right, they're not going to have the strength, you know, to cope with the demands that we're asking of them, and also they will break down in terms of injury.
Bananas are great if you're playing a long match. I mean, especially also if you don't have it long enough in between when you would eat and when you're going to play. I'll have a couple of bananas because that's it's not heavy, but it'll get you through the match. You aren't going to start feeling weak during the match.
Well, I now know all there is to know about tennis players' diets, but my ball skills are still a bit rusty. I think I'll stick to the day job.